Hey there folks, this is Greeny and I'm going to be doing a Resi 8 impressions video now. I completed it a couple of weeks ago and I had a comment or two on YouTube asking, you know, what are my views on it, so I thought I'll just make a video and that's what I'm going to do today. I've made a ton of notes and this is the version I went for. It is PS5, it's a Steelbook one. Surprisingly it was the same price where I bought it from as the standard edition. So Steelbook one. And here's the inside. So, yeah, nothing too exciting with the Steelbook, I don't think, but I prefer them to normal ones. They protect things a bit better. I just like them. I don't know why, really, but there we go. So, my thoughts on it. First things first, there are going to be spoilers throughout. I'm going to be talking pretty freely. I got my notes on my sort of layout, but I'm going to be talking pretty freely about it, especially when we get to the story part. So, there's your heads up. So, first thing. It is a first-person survival horror, if you don't know yet. It's not my preferred version of survival horror. I preferred it either like in Resi 4, where you were over the shoulder, or even back to the classics, where it was third-person, because you got all the really nice environments and stuff. Sort of like with Final Fantasy, like classic Final Fantasy, where everything was just pre-done and pre-rendered. I prefer that. I like that a lot in games. So going first person and not being able to see your main character really takes me away from him. And speaking of, is back with Ethan, the most bland and forgettable character. Even with what they tried to do in this game with him, I still find him forgettable because you never know what he looks like. Even at the end, I don't think you get to see his face. I think it's all like face down or shaded out or something along those lines. So I don't like Ethan. I don't like his girlfriend Mia, or wife, or whatever she is now. I think she's the most forgettable person in the world as well. Luckily they got their daughter now. I think her name is Rose, who gets shown at the end when maybe she'll be Resi 9's protagonist, and she looks more interesting. She could be a lot more interesting than Ethan, and because it's shown her face and everything, does that mean it's not going to be first person anymore? I hope so. I hope that's what it means. But yeah, so we are back with Ethan. There are no original sort of STARS members in this one except for Chris. But even with Chris, they've made him so serious and so just a bit boring. There's no humour to him. There's no traditional Resi cheese coming from him. Does that make sense? So, I don't know. I'm not that fussed on what they've done to Chris ever since past like the first game or Code Veronica. Like Resi 5, I didn't like what they did with him. Resi 6 either. They've made him the action man, and you know, I prefer a bit more horror to my games. So yeah, back to that. And I gotta say, Resi 8 is like, it's sort of a watered down Resident Evil 4. It's got so many similarities. Like, you start in a village, a rundown village in Romania this time. You know, Europe. It's still Europe, like Spain from 4, Romania this time. Then you go to a castle with the Castellan that you have to deal with. This time is Lady Dimitrescu, or however you pronounce it. I know they pronounce it like in the Romanian accent, maybe in the game, but that's what I'm going to say, Dimitrescu, because that's how I read it. In Resi 4 you had Salazar. They're both sort of high castle owning people. Only this time she's like vampiric with her daughters. So that's very interesting. You also have you have a merchant this time, again like 4, and he even makes reference to the Resi 4 one, saying his line, and then he goes, "No, I'm joking," that kind of thing. And I thought that was very funny. I thought it was clever, but because I'm a huge fan of Resi 4, and yeah, that. I actually think though, this merchant is more interesting than the merchant from 4. Like 4 had the more memorable lines and stuff, the quotes for memes and all that sort of stuff. But this one, his character is so interesting. Like when you first meet him, there's a carriage by the side, I think, of the castle, if I'm remembering right. And he just sort of rolls forward, because he's a big bloke, you know. He's called the Duke. Or he is a Duke. I never sort of figured it out, but we'd call him Duke anyway. And towards the end of the game, Ethan to sort of ask him who he is, what he's about, and they just go, he did just brush it off kind of thing. We never really learn about him because everyone wanted to know more about the merchant from Resi 4, but You never got to know anything about him, and you never do about the Duke in 8 either, not really. I wonder if there's going to be DLC coming. I don't know. Maybe you'll find out more about him in that, if there is going to be. I don't know. I haven't looked at that side of things, to be honest. Other similarities. We got the mini-games throughout the game. Like, in each location of the game, you get this sort of this ball rolling mini-game. What's it like? Did you ever play... When I was little, I'm going to show my age a little bit now. When I was little, there was this board game sort of thing called Labyrinth, where you had this massive wooden thing, where you rolled the ball by tilting the board, and there would be holes, so that you'd lose if the ball was in the hole. It reminds me of that, but with the themes of each of the locations. I only found the ball and the game, both of them, for the castle area. I never did it for any of the other areas, so I can only talk about the one really. But the thematics of the board, like, is a lot more interesting than you would think from that sort of game. But it is still just a ball rolling thing, and it's not as good as the shooting gallery from Resi 4, in my opinion. But the reward you get is money from the first one, probably the same for all the others. I think it's a treasure and then you sell it for money, kind of thing. So there's that. What else? Based in Europe again, like I said earlier, before it was in Spain in Resi 4, and this one is Resi 8. It's Romania in Resi 8. So, a lot of similarities. It doesn't actually say that it's Romania, I don't think, in the game, but the currency and the very sort of... It just feels Romanian. It's that sort of old style, old world Romanian. Yeah. So, my opinions on what makes it worse on Resi 4. Again, first person, I hate it. Resi 4 wasn't far off first person, but at least you got like the cutscenes and stuff to show off Leon and you know Leon. Whereas with Ethan, you never get to know him. I never cared about him as a character because of that. So there was that. The weapon upgrade system, that's back from 4. You go to the merchant, you upgrade your weapons, you sell stuff with treasure, combining treasure to get money to upgrade your equipment. You upgrade your attache case, your inventory screen. I never ran out of space in this one. So it's all very similar, but the weapon upgrade system ain't quite as good this time. It feels very like you upgrade a weapon a couple of times and then it's done. Like in 4 you have to really think about it, or at least I did. It might be because I played through it so many times, 4, that I just really got into it more. But in this one I never got into a weapon upgrade system, I just got the firepower going and that was about as much as I cared about. So, there's that. There are some really generic and forgettable areas that I'm going to go into next in the locations. But I preferred the ones from 4 again. Like, this castle in both, like I've said, I think the castle in 4 was better. It had a lot more traps, it had a lot more interesting areas to it. Like, 8 has some. It has some trap areas and things like that. But I prefer the ones from 4, just personal preference maybe. So, other things I don't like as much. The music. I think the music in the game is good in an atmospheric level, same as Breath of the Wild for me, for Zelda. But there's nothing catchy. It's nothing I go to YouTube straight away and put in my favourites list. There's nothing like interesting. Like, I always like the music a lot from the rest rooms, the safe rooms. Like 4 had an amazing one, Resi 1, 0, all of them. I think all of them had an interesting track when you were safe in the typewriter rooms or whatever. But in this one, I never even noticed there was a track. I had to go onto YouTube because someone mentioned it to me. I went onto YouTube to listen to it, and I realised why. It's so quiet, it's so backgroundy, so atmospheric like everything else. It's not interesting. It's got a bit of Resi 4-ness to it, but it's not as good. Again. And again, I don't think the ball rolling minigame is as good as the shooting gallery from Resi 4. That might be personal preference, but I think it was just more interesting, the shooting. Yeah. So there's that. Like I said, the locations, some of them are really bloody good, by the way, but some of them are so forgettable. Like, okay, the first area you get dropped off. Well, technically the first area is your house, Ethan's house, but then you move on to, you get kidnapped kind of thing and get dropped off in Romania, the village, which I think it's your hub world, it's your hub area kind of. Then you go off to different areas to get different sort of body parts for your baby in flasks. Kind of reminds me of, what was that game by a guy who left Konami? Oh shit. When you had to carry the fetus a long way, and I can't remember the name of it now. Death Standing? I want to say Death Standing, I can't think though. Reminds me of that, where you're collecting body parts for your baby to get her back together. Rose. And you go to different locations, because each of the sort of heads of the village, or the location, have got a different body part to protect, kind of thing. So you go to the village first, and you find out, you know, there's something wrong, obviously. The villagers are turned into werewolves, kind of things. They're not called werewolves, but that's what they are. And you meet a couple of villagers, they all die off because they're so generic looking, you know they're going to, and all that sort of stuff. This is just sort of rustic, oldie worldy, run-down, very brown sort of area. I don't think it's designed quite as well as the one in Resi 4, in my personal opinion, yet again. I feel like it's too big, and I feel like there's not enough interesting stuff going on. Like Resi 4, I felt like there was a lot of nice elements. There was the tower to snipe from, there was just loads of stuff going on. It was close enough altogether to really see it all and, yeah, hold my interest at least. It starts off, when you get to the village, pretty much starts off with a sort of attacking scene like in Resi 4. I know I'm comparing a lot, but like the attacking scene where all the enemies are coming at you at once and you're running away, you're trying to use barrels to explode them, to use pushing shelves to shut doors off, and things like that. There's a big baddie if you want to fight it. If you don't want to fight it, you don't have to. So you probably haven't got the weapons and stuff for it yet. You can get a shotgun during that part, just like in Resi 4. So it's all very similar, very watered down version. So yeah, that's the village, and then you make your way to the castle, where, you know Lady Dimitrescu by now. You've seen it all over the internet, you've seen all the memes. There was this one mod actually, just to say, there was this one mod where every time you see her hack is bigger. I thought it was so funny. Someone shared that with me on Facebook and I was laughing my head off at that. It's another one where she's Thomas the Tank Engine. Her head is like a Thomas the Tank Engine, and that's creepier than her actual face, I'll be honest with you. So yeah, there are a couple of mods out there on the PC scene. I play PS5 obviously, like I said, but they are there. Yeah, castle. So you go to a castle, it's like the vampiric overlording castle over the village. Think Transylvania, think Salem's Lot, think yeah, that sort of thing. The castle that overlords over the villagers. So that's the vibe you get from Dimitrescu and her 3 daughters that you fight along the way through the castle. I think you have to kill them. I'm not actually sure. I did. Maybe you can avoid them. I wonder. I don't know. But I killed them off anyway, because God knows why not. I love the area. It's my favourite area in the entire game. There is another one that comes close, but it gives off that proper Resi exploration mansion vibe. You know? Like it's the mansion, the training facility from 0, the police station from 2. It's that sort of key items here and there to unlock new puzzle rooms and things like that. And that's why I love it. It's a proper Resi area. The only one in the game, by the way, that I would call a proper Resi area. But it's amazing. The gothic style of it with Dimitrescu chasing you like Nemesis or Mr. X throughout. It's incredible. I loved it so much. Then you move on to the doll's house, which is owned by another of the village overlords. Each of the 4 areas I'm going to mention are going to be what's her name? Donna Beneviento? Sounds Italian. Donna Beneviento. She is this sort of psychic character who, if you look at the concept art in the game, it talks about her being a ghost. I don't know how that got into the game, or if it did or not. But she can control dolls, and she has this little doll that runs around while she's in the shadows, because she can't fight herself. So she's pretty weak. She's one of those characters. She's pretty weak. She's probably psychic, I guess. She puts parts of her ability into the dolls. I don't know 100% how it works, but that's the kind of thing. And you go to a doll's house, and the thing you can first see is a million dolls laid around everywhere. And that's weird enough. I love that sort of thing, and I love this area. That's weird enough on its own. But once you get far enough and you fight her as a boss, she isn't a proper boss. She's like hide and seek. You have to find her one doll that she loves the most, that she put I guess most of her abilities into, that's lying around somewhere. And while you're running around looking for it, all the other dolls are sort of going nuts, and you have a time limit, and the closer you get to the end of the time limit, the more nuts the dolls get. Eventually the dolls attack you and you lose some health. You have like 3 chances, I think, on normal. So you find her doll 3 times around the house, and then you just kill it off. There's no boss fight, that's all the boss fight is. But what I thought was more of a boss fight in this place, even though you don't technically fight it or kill it, is a chase scene with a giant fetus. Because when you enter, you find out that the doll's house is like taking your memories and making it into, you know. So you're thinking of Rose, and then that turns Rose into this grotesque giant fetus thing that only appears and chases you when all the lights go out. And it's so scary. It's the one scary part of the game, because it's not a horror game. It's got horror vibes, but it's not like... It's more action, I would say. It's got horror vibes, but it's more action. It's got the odd horror bit. The doll's house is the main one. And I loved it so much. I love this area. It's like you have all your weapons taken away for this area, see, and you have. It's more like a room escape game if you've played any of them. You know, Crimson Room or on the internet. That's an early one. It's like a room escape game. You solve puzzles. You look at this giant mannequin that's laid on a morgue bed, I think it was, or table maybe. I did just finding different key items to explore, just like with the castle, but this time more so because you're escaping the house kind of thing. So that's the doll's house, and I loved it so much. I'm hoping it's not Resident Evil, that doll's house. There's no zombies, there's no creatures. It's just like ghosts. Like, remember with Final Fantasy, with Resident Evil 4, the prototype was like ghosts and the hooked man and everything like that, and they decided not to go with it because it wasn't Resident Evil enough. That didn't seem to affect this game. They didn't seem to care that this wasn't Resident Evil enough, because that's exactly what it is here. It's phantoms, it's psychic abilities, it's, you know, it's Silent Hill-ish, almost. So, it's interesting that they didn't care this time, but they did on 4. Yeah. I don't mind, it's one of my favourite areas, but, you know, I can see why people would complain, like Resident Evil fans would complain, maybe. So, yeah, that's the doll's house. Going back to the baby going around, I died to it once. I just want to see what would happen. He eats you. She eats you. While crying and saying how yummy it is. That was terrifying. I loved it. It was a great death scene. Yeah, so there's that. The next area, the next major area, was the swamp. This seems to be a recurring area lately. Like, there was a swamp in 7, there was a swamp in 5, there was a swamp in 4. It's a marsh, a swamp, whatever you want to call it. It's actually called Moros area, but I like to call it the swamp just because that's what it is pretty much. It's got all these windmills? Electricity generating windmill kind of things around the swamp. And you go around with cranks and stuff and you try and make your way around. This is where the game starts to go a little bit more action-y than the previous areas. It loses its horror a bit. I don't like this area too much. I don't like swamps in games. It's not interesting. They're horrible to look at. They're trudgy to walk through and things like that. I don't know. But what I did like was the overlord of this area. You know, you had Dimitrescu, you had the doll woman in the dollhouse. This one has a creature called Moreau. He is extremely ugly looking, intentionally so. He looks like Lisa Trevor from the Resi 1 remake. Exactly like her. Got the tentacles coming out the back, got the humped, got the almost oval body figure. Does that make sense? And the difference is that he spews a lot, and that's acidy, that sort of vibe. And he can turn into a giant fish, which obviously Lisa Trevor couldn't do. Like a giant fish monster, and that's your sort of boss. Not in the water though, it's outside the water when the water's been drained, but it's the it's fishy. It's not a scary area. The boss is hardish. It's the hardest boss, I would say, but so far at least. But that's what it is. I love Moreau, by the way. I loved it as a Lisa Trevor throwback. That's how I see it, if it's not intentional. But yeah, it's a forgettable area. That's my issue with it. Other than the boss and the Overlord, it's a forgettable area. That's my only issue. Speaking of forgettable areas, the next one, the Stronghold. It's like, it reminds me of like an Uncharted sort of ruins. Like the first Uncharted, I think it's like chapter 5, chapter 6, maybe a bit further, I don't know. When you go into the ruins, it reminds me of that sort of area with tons of enemies around. It's pure action by this point, like pure action. And you're just shooting everything, and that is the whole goal of the area. Just waves of enemies, kind of thing. And even the boss, it isn't. You don't fight the Overlord as such. It's like this giant sort of werewolfy creature. I think it has a giant club or something that you fight at the end of it. It's not even an Overlord to it, but it is a big area, you can tell. I don't know. It's not my favourite either. Like the Swamp and the Stronghold are my favourites. Speaking of not my favourites, next up is the factory for the fourth of the 4 sort of Overlords of the village, of the area. Heisenberg's factory, and Heisenberg is this psychic guy. He can make, or metallic guy. He can make all metal come towards himself or throw loads of metal from around the room at you. Telekinesis style, you know. He's an interesting character. He didn't want to be one of the Overlords, but he was forced to be. I can't remember the reason why. But I've only played through it once. It's a very long area, one of the longest, and it's so bland because it's a factory. It's a dead factory, you know. There's not a lot to it. There's a bit of rust here and there. I don't know. The most interesting puzzle is where you're taking molds to this machine to make the actual shape. So you take a key mold to the machine to make a key, and there's a couple of other times you do it there as well. I wasn't fussed. The good thing about it, there's this one boss there who I can't remember the name of the actual enemy, the creature, but it's like this giant sort of machine. Reminds me of the Bioshock Big Daddies a little bit, but this time instead of a drill, it's got like a big fan around the front that it can hit you with, and it charges and stuff, and it can shoot flames like flamethrower style. It was an interesting boss. It was hard. I found it hard. Like a lot of the game I found pretty okay, but this guy I found pretty hard. So there was that. It's pure action by this point. Like I said with the Stronghold, there's no horror left. You also fight Heisenberg later himself, and because it's pure action by this point, you have this big robot to go in, and he has a robot, and it's like Robot Wars kind of thing. You're just shooting his weak points with your robot. You've got infinite ammo with your machine gun style, and on the other hand we've got rockets when it charges up. We've seen it in Resi 5, I think it was. Probably Resi 6 as well, knowing that game. So, I didn't like it once it got actiony. That's not Resident Evil. It's meant to be some horror, some action. That's the whole series, you know. It's horror, action horror. But it's there. There's some interesting bits scattered throughout it, so I'm not too disappointed. Once you've done all this, once you've got all of Rose put back together, you get to be Chris for a bit. You actually get to control him. You have infinite ammo, or what might as well be infinite ammo on normal mode. You have pretty much infinite heals. You'll get through it. You should get through it fine. You have waves of enemies. You have unique weapons and stuff to him. And you reach a point where then you get through the village as him in the night, in the rain and stuff like that. I think chapter 2 of the village in Resi 4, all the rains come, is darker. And then eventually you get to be Ethan again, and you are fighting against, what's her name? Miranda, the overarching, above the 4 village overlords, the overarching sort of villain. She's had this sort of project all along in order to make the village into this sort of crazed, I guess, infected village that can still go on. Yeah, it can function. Yeah, so that's her idea. So then you kill her off, and that's pretty much the end of the game, pretty much. Spoiler, like I said, there's been spoilers throughout, but major spoiler. At the end of the game, Ethan dies. You find out he's been dying a lot because his hand's been ripped off, as the whole Mamie internet world has been going on about. He's been dead since Resi 7. Jack killed him, Jack Baker. And he's been this mould creature all the way through, keeping him alive. But he actually dies for good this time. It's this massive explosion, typical Resi style at the end. And yeah, he's dead for good, and you see his daughter going to his grave at the end. And she is something to do with, not Umbrella, what are they called now? The big sort of people who are taking care of all these kind of supernatural events lately. So she's a part of them, I guess, being trained up. That's my theory. And I'm hoping she comes back for Resi 9. As a protagonist, that would be nice. Anyway, locations, that's done. Graphics. I think they're very good. They are very good, sort of PS4 style graphics. I played it on PS5, but it came out on PS4 and PS5, so another obviously every other platform except for Switch, probably. They're good. They work. They're a bit browny. You can't really show off amazing graphics in browny environments like this, I don't think. But the castle looked good, so that's all I can think of, really. There's not much else I can say about it, I don't think. Ethan's bloody hand always looks good. I don't know what else to say. The music. Okay, the music. I said before, it's very generic, it's atmospheric. It's never going to be amazing when it's atmospheric music, in my opinion. It doesn't stand out in that regard. But it works in an atmospheric sort of way. It adds to the scares when it's meant to be scary. You know, it's a horror sort of soundtrack. Okay, gameplay. Typical first-person horror with shooting. You're not going to get much more out of it. It's Resi 7 style. It's the same, pretty much. Aiming is solid. You do waver a bit, especially with the sniper. I found the sniper so hard to aim with. I love snipers in games, in shooting games, but I found it so hard to deal with in this game. Like, you get attachments for your weapons. For the sniper, it makes it easier to less wobble wavering as you're shooting around. It's not going. So you can get those headshots easier. So yeah, aiming is good. It works. It's an open world village area, which I don't normally like open world, but this is small enough, even with open world, that I don't mind it too much. Yeah, so it's not too bad. It gives you exploration, it gives you that sort of thing. There are lots of collectibles to find, treasures. There are these little, are they goats? Like goat figures? You have to find, I think, 20 of them throughout the game. I think it's just a trophy, I don't know what else it gives you. I never got them all. Towards the end there's too much action, I mentioned that already. It's not a scary game. It's almost entirely an action game now. You're not going to be scared by Dimitrescu. I never got scared by her even when she was chasing me, because I could just run around the table and go through the door, you know. She was scarier in the demo, I thought. I don't know. But it's there. So, story is okay. It's the same as Resi 7, where the story's okay. It's more about the characters, I think. But then even the characters die off so quick after you meet them. Most of them. Dimitrescu, the big selling point of the game, she dies off pretty early on, you know. Once you do the castle, she's gone. But the story's okay. It's I just prefer the Stars plotline from early Resis. I prefer like 0 to 4 with Code Veronica. They're the stories that I prefer from Resi. Even 5 was better than this one, I thought. The Baker Family of 7 was better than this one. I don't know. It's the story's there to push you along, and the character's more interesting in the story. I think what took me out of the story, one, first person, so you never see Ethan, you never know your main character properly till near the end, but even then it's not that good. And it's how the sort of characters talk to you. It's like they're talking to a camera rather than talking to your character. Because as first person, you never really feel like they're interacting with your character, and then you never get the scares or the feeling that your character's scared because of it. Because you don't see them, you don't see their faces. I don't know. It's not my preferred thing. I prefer the Stars storyline from early Resi games. And I hope they go back into a Resi Code Veronica remake, because that was an incredible game. It was better than 3, in my opinion. Yeah, I hope they do. Yeah, overall, I think it's an 8 out of 10. It's good. It's not my highest tier of Resi games. It's like, it's down there with maybe 5 for me. I like 5. It's down there with 5, 2 and 3 for me. My lesser favourite Resi games. I say 2, the original 2, the remake was better. Yeah. So it's a really good game, and I recommend you play it. Wait for discounts, in my opinion. It's a short game, even if you replay it a lot. Yeah. So, otherwise, are there any side stuff to do? Yeah. You can play Mercenaries on your own, sort of Resi 4 style. There's no co-op, there's no online and all that sort of stuff. You can do that, I haven't tried it. It's probably okay, I like Mercenaries and most of them, except for 6. What other side things? There's loads of challenges, loads of trophies. You know the trophy system by now. Loads of challenges. You can unlock loads of infinite weapons and stuff by doing the challenges. I think there's probably more, but I can't think of it. You actually get a beta. You actually get to go into this game where it's pretty much mercs. You go with your mates, I think. and you fight off monsters in past Resi games, like areas from past Resi games. I haven't tried it, so I don't know anything about it. I should try it sometime, but I know all these sorts of spin-off games and things like that have been really bad. Like Operation Raccoon City, it was so terrible, and just every one of them, every spin-off of Resi seems to be bad. Code Veronica not counting, because I count that as a main Resi Evil game, even if it's not numbered. Because it's got a main character, it's got a proper story, it's got proper Resi elements to it. But the shooters that they try and do, the first-person shooters and stuff, are just always so bad. First-person shooters outside of 7 and 8, I mean. Yeah. So that's my impressions video. I hope you enjoyed. Shout out to Mango Man, Mango Mesh, who asked me a few questions about all this. So I hope I answered all the questions. Give me a shout in the comments if there's anything else you want to know about the game. Yeah. Thank you so much for watching all. I'll see you again in a bit.